All this is Dr. Mubin Sayed. Welcome to one more show. Once again, for your kind information, this setup is mine. These lighting, I had them for a year now. So this is not me copying Biden. It may be Biden copying me. So I want to keep the setup. Plus, usually it is on, but when the bigger lights turn on, this kind of uh, accents get suppressed. I'm not keeping the bigger lights on because we need to conserve energy here. So this is how we're gonna talk. So the first questions, a couple of things. Number one, the FLCCC conference. Let me quickly share it. This is the link to FLCCC conference. I'm going to share that here as well. I'm going to be presenting as well. We'll reach there on 14th, come back on 16th, 15th. I think I'm presenting as well. And my presentation is going to be the management of spike protein and the methods to do that. So that would be my, of course, I'll talk about intermittent fasting and then many other things that we've done. Here are the questions for the yesterday's talk. There are lots of questions. So I'll see whatever I can answer. I also want to go over some of the FSCCC protocols, especially in the context of long COVID. And I also want to, there is so much I have to um, uh, mention, and it is good to know. M. Gregory says this lighting helps with the eye strain. Very good. Good that it is comforting or not as stressful. There are some folks who have been posting on my channel replies to people impersonating me. And it is funny. People actually earn more with my name and my picture than I do. It is so funny. I'm not businessy at all. I have actually lost more business during the last 2 years doing the service than gained. But there are people who are actually, uh, unfortunately, deceiving people. So, what they're doing is this: they create a channel. A channel is created as soon as you have a Gmail account. They create a channel, they use my picture on their channel, and on the YouTube, inside the comments, you can block the words like WhatsApp or Telegram or call me. But in the name of a channel, you cannot block anything. So what they do is they name themselves as official channel account, WhatsApp number this. The whole thing is the name. And then below that, they just write a message to you saying, hey, why not we talk directly over this WhatsApp number or Telegram? And they have bots which would go and post such a message hundreds of times. So I reached out to YouTube and I said, how do I get rid of this? Because they are actually taking money from people saying that Dr. Bean is, I don't do consultation. I don't practice here in the US. So they are actually charging fees and engaging people for a consultation with me. So I reached out to YouTube. I said, so they asked me to hide the users. I've done that, but they just pop up with a new name. The other thing they said was, you will have to go and delete all those comments. So I had to, over this weekend, I had to spend go to hundreds of comments and remove these spam. So be aware. Beware. If they could use the same power of marketing for their something good, they can actually make more money. They can sell stuff, but they chose to be thieves. Something wrong in such folks' upbringing, some issue with their training. Okay, let's start. So I would never ask you. I actually try to hide my number because I receive so many threats, my wife and I both. So I actually try to hide my numbers and my contacts. And here they are giving up the numbers to say contact here. Okay. Let's start. Questions.
Ask away.
Alexa, stop. So, starting from Natasha, any suggestions on the new vaccine for long haulers? Natasha, what do you mean by new vaccine? The booster with the Omicron? So, a few long haulers say, excuse me, a few long haulers say that they benefit from the vaccine, and it can actually make sense. And I have done this discussion in the past as well. Let me share my screen too, so I can draw every once in a while. So, if I go back to this one, so we have done this discussion that virus or vaccine, either when the spike protein comes into our body, what we do is we make antibodies against that, correct? So let's say this is the anti spike, broad name, but anyways, let's say this is anti spike antibody. Then what happens is, to clear these anti-spike antibodies, I'm sweating because it's hot and AC is not working, so I'm gonna wear my gloves so my hands slip on the screen. So anti-spike antibody is made. Now our body, to clear this anti-spike antibody, makes antibodies against this guy. Now a excuse me, I'm so sorry. This antibody against this one is going to be looking like a spike protein epitope. That means this can actually bind to ACE2. And if it can bind to ACE2, it can actually trigger the cell, cause inflammation, cause downregulation of the ACE2, imbalance of the inflammation, and so on. This is called anti-EDO type antibodies. Now, if somebody has these anti-idiotype antibodies and they have long COVID because of that, if they take a vaccine, in some cases, not everyone, in some cases, as the vaccine arrives and brings a spike protein, which produces this antibody would now neutralize this one, the anti-idiotype, and the patient would feel better. This mechanism, this process can give their immune system enough break that this can long hauler can actually just go away, but doesn't happen in everyone. And who will it happen to is not known. Maybe one way to figure that out is to do the anti-ACE2 antibody testing, which is done in Germany, celltrends.com or whatever. Some Cell Trends is the company that do it. I think they can collect blood from here and do the testing. And so if there is anti-ACE2 antibodies present, then such a person could benefit from the vaccine booster. There are people where it actually becomes aggravated as well. So Natasha, I hope that answers that question. Colombian Coffee Bean says, have viable virus been detected in long haul patients? Should be ample opportunity to gather samples for gut and test. So this is the first time in these two cases where they're showing it. This is why this study is important, or this case series is important. But you're correct. If somebody wanted to, we know that the GIT has been shown to contain the viral proteins and residues even up to 184 days by the same team. Now they're showing it up to 426 days. To me, that is good enough evidence that there is a possibility of the reservoir in GIT. The question will be, how do we help that? So to help that, I was really sad yesterday that there were so many people who were disappointed that, hey, I have long COVID for 2 years, 1.5 years, and I'm suffering. At least look at Maybe just look at it, long COVID, post vaccine, both of these. If I go to the long COVID, what I have seen is, and those who are long COVID, I'm sure that they have tried so many things. Prednisone early on is very useful because it breaks the cycle of the immune dysregulation. Then IV is very, very useful. No low dose naltrexone works like magic for some people. Similarly, Maraviroc works like magic for some people. Intermittent fasting is amazing. Spermidine and resveratrol is amazing. I have actually been working with Dr. Paul Merrick to research these products, drugs, even do the lectures on these for FLCCC. Somebody made a comment that Mubin, he sings a different song for FLCCC channel. Yes, because with FLCCC, I am solely focused on vaccine and long COVID injuries, and that's the only area I work with. On my own channel, I pick up whatever topic I want to discuss, including medical education topics. So, of course, you're going to find a difference. Over there, over here in the FLCCC, it is very focused, long COVID related talks and vaccine injury. So, spermidine and resveratrol, melatonin, vitamin D, omega 3, aspirin, curcumin. Fluvoxamine, hydroxy could become a problem with the autophagy. So hydroxy, then continue on the page 2. Let's go to the page 2. I just wanted to give you an idea. Mitochondrial energy optimizers, N-acetylcysteine, NSC, Maraviroc, non-invasive brain stimulation. I actually did a talk about it. Majority of the products here, I have talked about them. So my request is to at least look at them and discuss with your doctor. There may be some things that would help. In the majority of the cases, other than tinnitus, I have to this date not found a good answer for tinnitus. Other than that, neurological symptoms, GIT issues, skin issues, neuropathies, uh, visual, most of those are handleable by this protocol. There are still people like Sean or like Michelle or Bree that are not handled by this. So please give it a look. So there was another question in the beginning. Let me see if I can scroll all the way up. I saw a question early on by Augie. Augie, you had a question. Here, look, it was still here. So a daily Luffy is in order? I think so. Can okay, so next question. Now I'm at the end. So if you had a question and that scrolled up, please ask again. I'm going to see any fresh. Excuse me. Kim says, I started taking nasal crom as a mast cell stabilizer. Each time I use it, I get a sore throat within 30 minutes. It lasts about 6 to 9 hours. Could that mean that the virus is hiding in my throat? Not just that virus. There are tons of viruses and bacteria that are always here. So anytime you hold the hand of, let's say, innate arm, macrophages or mast cells are part of that, it is possible that there is a reaction. Now, is it because the drug itself is causing it by allergy, or is it that it is reducing the innate arm's function and then opportunistic bacteria just or viruses are taking their turn? But there are tons of pathogens in our mouth and throat. ZZ Berman says, do you believe full recovery is plausible based on these reports and findings? Yes. So The yes question will need to be qualified because the phenotypes, the pathologies are different for everyone. There are folks, as I just said, Sean or Michelle or Bree, and I'm sure there are so many. These are the ones that I know who are not recovered, but they're still becoming better. All of them are becoming better, be it very slowly. My wife has almost become 100% recovered. So I believe in it. If I was hopeless, I would have probably stopped working on this. So I'm not hopeless. And every day, more studies, more discussions, more data. So some, it is so funny. I just saw a comment. Somebody said, Dr. Bean has changed his position a lot from where he started. It's really the data is evolving. And as the more data, I would be stupid if there is more data that comes in and I look at that and I just ignore it because my position was something else. This is not politics, this is medicine. So when they, for example, these two case reports have changed my mind on virus persisting or not. Good. If I'm not open minded, how would I research for you? So then let's see. John says, once this particular RNA gets in a cell, is it only safe until the cell expires? RNA is degraded within a few days. I did a discussion how long the RNA survives in our cells. So when the RNA is inside the cell, the ribosomes would start working on it. Let me draw. That would also take care of my drawing itch. So so here is the cell, the RNA is in here. So ribosomes would start working with this RNA. I have to make eyes, and they will start making proteins, correct? Then what happens is, and this can take days, RNA's engagement with ribosomes working on them, making proteins. So it can be engaged with the ribosomes for days. And one piece of RNA can actually be engaged by tons of ribosomes. Many ribosomes can all be chewing on it. They're not chewing, they're kind of reading and working on it. So that is like if there is one recipe book and there are tons of chefs with their own ovens and everything, and you first chef reads the first paragraph, hands it to the next one does a paragraph, and so on, and they just keep reading together. After a few days, there are enzymes called RNases. Their job is to break down the RNA. So they would pick up these RNA and they'll break them down. Now, there is a valid question that will the RNA for a vaccine do the same thing? Vaccines RNA has some genetic modification, some not genetic, some nucleotide modifications to stabilize it to live longer. So now we know that 8 9 days at the site of injection, then in the local lymph nodes, couple of weeks, actually not couple of weeks, 2 months. That is the RNA for the vaccine that I saw the last study that I read. So to answer your question again, once the particular RNA is in the cell, is it only safe until the cell expires? So even if the cell does not expire, because many of our cells will not die, they would just be there, the RNA would be degraded. The problem is, like the monocytes that Dr. Bruce Patterson's team said, that it is hanging on to a spike protein in it, or some part of the spike protein, S1 part, and it just keeps working with it. So maybe when this monocyte becomes too senescent and is going to die, then another monocyte bites it. This is how we clear our cells, that a macrophage would eat other cells, and more than monocytes, the macrophages do that. So they would eat up the other cell, and now whatever is this cellular debris, that would also be transferred to the next cell, and maybe now the next cell is not infected but carrying that. But generally, to answer your question, a few days later the RNA should go away. Barbara says, is there any way to reliably detect these rubbery clots that grow in the body and lead to sudden death, from microclots to those above monstrosities? How many have who suffer long haul have this? So, first of all, during the lifetime, the clots are broken down by the blood thinners. But there can be clots that are not broken down by blood thinners, and that these can then cause death. Of course, there is no solution to them. That is why they cause death. But blood thinners are usually. There are little tiny filters as well that can be used if a person is known to have the clots, but that is a more invasive procedure. That filter itself can become a source of clotting because blood can start striking it and then start clotting there. John says, you are very welcome, John. Yeah. So ammonia is produced by the gut bacteria, liver, if it is not able to handle it well, or if more ammonia is produced, then it goes to the brain and causes that. Okay, what else? Logic says, can we please do a video speaking about the microbiome and demyelinating AI diseases like GBS and MS, focusing on the. Yes, the question is, how do we collect them? So, to the moderators and to the cool beans here, what is the way to collect and prioritize the topics? There are more topics than I can cover, and we need to collect them somewhere and then prioritize them. Any suggestions, please? These are welcome. ZZ Berman says, how can those sensitive to the spike protein take a vax? So, if spike protein, of course, spike in the virus can cause more severe disease in some. And if it is that kind of a person, then maybe they cannot take a vaccine. The question is it the vaccine or the adjuvant or the spike protein itself? And if it is the spike protein itself, how do you know? But that's an interesting question. The simple answer would be, if somebody is sensitive to spike protein, then they cannot take a vaccine. If they want to take a vaccine, then they would have to take all those um, protective protocols with it to reduce the punch of the vaccine. Dr. Bean Medical Lectures. So Crystal says, you keep mentioning that the vaccinated getting ill, but what about the unvaccinated who are getting this same illness? I don't keep talking about the vaccinated getting ill. Uh, Actually, even in the discussion today, the discussion before this one, I specifically said that I'm going to show you the studies, and I have put the links for them, which were about unvaccinated. Actually, those studies are still up here. This study, let me see where it is. So here, women more likely to have long COVID, different symptoms. And here, if you see, the researcher examined academic papers on COVID that were published between December 2019 and August 2020, plus studies on long COVID that appeared between Jan 2020 to June 2021. The total sample size included 1.3 million people, but the team pointed out that only 35 of articles provided data. And then they said, all of the 35 studies were conducted before COVID-19 vaccination was widely available. Only 5 of the studies addressed long COVID. So even today, I discussed it. So I think the problem is that some folks just have this perception that I would keep talking about vaccine. Here is very simple thing. As more and more people become vaccinated, COVID and vaccine interactions are more. So whatever studies are there, I would discuss them. I'm actually looking for a study from Qatar for unvaccinated and intensity or severity of the COVID. The problem is their cohort size left with the unvaccination is so small that study results are not that reliable. I actually reached out to their one of their studies researchers, uh, lead researchers, and asked him some questions about it, and he did not respond. So I do not know how to answer this, and I think whatever I say, perception is perception, and I just have to keep working. Actually, if you look at my videos in the early part of the previous years, that was all unvaccinated and the diseases, including long COVID and the cytokine storms and the inflammatory imbalances and the drugs that are working and the drugs that are not working. This is not that time. We have moved from here to majority vaccinated and vaccination having issues as well, vaccinated having issues too, and unvaccinated too. So I don't know how to answer your question. Crystal Shaman, if you go to the last video that I did, in the description, this is one of the link in it. So if you don't want to hear what my message is or don't want to look at these and just want to accuse people, then I cannot fix that. Skyfrog says, I understand one of the new boosters is half dose Wuhan and half dose BA1. How effective can half a dose of each be useful when we have BA4 and 5? So it is a funny combination that they approved. I remember that when they were doing this discussion, the FDA meetings, I was actually relaying those. Remember that 6, 7 hour, 8 hour long kind of very strange meetings? It was clear that the Wuhan variant vaccine was not very useful and the Omicron should be needed. However, I still remember thinking because one of the doctors said, well, we feel more comfortable with the already existing vaccine, so why not we just create a combination? And I still feel that there can be a pros on or hook effect because of that. But generally, if I go back here to the drawing board, if I go back here in the drawing board, um, the vaccines, the two spike proteins, so let's say this is one spike protein. This is, let's say, Wuhan. And then here is, I'm just going to make it like this. This is, let's say, Omicron. When you give a vaccine dose, then some of your B cells would start working, let's say, here. And efficacy reduction means that they are probably attacking areas of the vaccine or the spike protein that is not in the binding region, or they're loosely binding. However, when you give another booster, it is possible that not only the variant parts will work, but there will be more antibodies produced to other parts of the vaccine, spike protein that is common between both of them, which would also help. Generally, a booster can improve a general response and then to a special response too. Half dose doesn't matter because collectively they are a complete dose and they are still attacking majority of the conserved part of the spike protein. So it should be okay. Melody says, I don't think they want to study unvaccinated. I know a lot of vaccinated. Yeah. And it would actually be, I have always discussed it, that it would be great to have the data, clear data for vaccinated, unvaccinated, instead of unvaccinated data just totally not fully presented, the comorbidity is not presented, and then just put that data out there. And for whoever, there are so many studies I pasted today which were about this, that vaccine, this concept that somehow vaccine is long covid, or vaccine causes long covid, or long covid occurs to people who had vaccinated, that is just not a correct concept. This is why I posted these studies. Okay. So Kim says, are the over the counter mast cell stabilizers strong enough to help calm down the immune system? Not strong enough. If they were, they would not be over the counter, but they can give you enough modulation that it doesn't become too bad. If they were too strong, they would become prescribed only, prescription only. Robin says, what are your thoughts on releasing the bivalent booster? So, once again, as I said to Sky as well, it is good that they're targeting more Omicron, so the efficacy should improve. I didn't think that bivalent was needed, and it was a totally unscientific way of discussing when they did the discussion in the FDA briefing meeting, where they just said we feel more comfortable if we have the previous vaccine in here as well. That was just not a scientific thing to do, but they did it. Misha says, how would you know if you have clots and microclots? So clots have various symptoms. For example, petechial hemorrhages or easy bruising or those pins and needles in the hands. Then lab tests with the D dimers, PCRs, platelet counts, platelet factor 4, antibodies for platelets. So there are many various ways to figure it out. A doctor will have to work it up. Crystal Shaman says, very unfriendly here, leaving. Thank you. Rima says, I watch you live. Uh, Thank you. So, Kini, this is a question for which I have dropped the ball. The reason is, Cool Beans had been asking me so many times to talk about hair loss and COVID, and I just did not find enough time to read these studies. And because of that, I am ignorant about it. And because of that, I cannot give you a good answer. So please give me a few days. I will read it up and discuss it. It is actually my bad. Sandra says that my leg just starts burning, it hurts and won't stop. I'm so sorry about that. Sandra, one, I cannot offer advice. Secondly, there can be so many reasons, neurological reasons, vascular reasons, local tissue issues, autoimmune issues. So please get it worked up and quickly, because it can be a blood clotting issue as well. So please get it worked up. Stanley says, Dr. Bean, is the virus still replicating or is it virus particles? Are you referencing the last studies? 426 days later, if the RNA is found outside the cells, then that means the virus was replicating somewhere and that cell died and the RNA came out. Yes, this is correct. Zizi says, I watch you live the end. Lol, thank you. John says, Meeple art question. So, is there a chance that COVID stays in some patients forever like EBV? So, the thing is this, we do not know if it is going to stay forever like EBV. We only know 426 days, for example, or 180 days, for example, or 15 months in some cases. The spike protein has one pieces only. So, there is not sufficient time to be able to conclude that it would stay there forever. I am actually um, a little comforted by this, that every long hauler has said that I continue to become better. Now, is it that their immune system is kind of becoming energetic to the virus and saying whatever, I'm not going to respond to it? Or is it that immune system very gradually is able to continue to clean it out? I don't know the answer to that, and only time would tell. It's a good question. Okay, so Critical Thought says thumbs up for Skyfrog's booster question. Yes, that was a good question. Yes. Celeste says, is chronic diarrhea a symptom of long COVID? Yes, if it occurred after the infection, or it occurred after infection was gone, you were recovered, and then there is no other explainable cause and the symptoms reappeared. So yes, actually diarrhea is one important sign of long COVID. And that is what we just discussed in the previous discussion. So, Sunset with that is a very good question. So, now that I'm going to answer this one, and then there will be, it is so funny that in my community, there are folks who do not like vaccines, who are vaccine hesitant. Then there are folks who are pro vaccine. And whenever I talk about some topic that is against their belief, they would, you know, hit me back. So whenever I talk about vaccine, people call me names. But here's the deal: my oldest son had to get his booster, so he did get. My younger son informed me about a week ago that his college has. He's totally remote, but his college still sent him a letter saying that, hey, give us your history. He gave them his history. He doesn't have a booster, and he said that they are probably going to come back and say you need to have a booster. So I said, once they write the letter, we'll figure it out. Then for myself and my wife, we are, remember, my wife actually had the vaccine injury from Johnson and Johnson. We are planning for a travel. You saw my family events. So there are some travels that I have to do. And one such part of the travel requires vaccination within last 9 months. So my wife and I are very seriously talking about it. So we'll see. Barbara says, your recent lecture showed spike and mRNA and protein RNA hiding in macrophages and possibly gut. Does anyone know if they hide in gut bacteria as a reservoir too? That is not answered. There is no study yet that I have read, although these authors or researchers made one conjecture to say that it is possible that there is a gut dysbiosis, meaning there is a disruption of the bacteria. But they did not go as far as saying we have seen bacteria carrying the virus or virus present there. Good question. I'm actually surprised from his college. His college, the whole course is entirely remote, online, but they're still so idiotic that they still want the proof of the vaccine. It's just strange. Augie says, I got my employer to provide Mubin lectures for staff. Wow, that is awesome. Thank you. This is a very good question. Dr. Bean, if you had to move from California, where would you move to? So I was actually thinking about uh, Florida. However, today I saw this news where the person was lost in some part of Florida, and an alligator chewed his arm off, and he was lost for 3 days afterwards. And I see alligators on the golf courses walking leisurely. So I don't know. I don't want to go to the East Coast, although I would love to go live in New York for some time just for the experience of it. I used to live in Massachusetts, um, but I don't know. You tell me. John says if you had to move to so same Melody, that is correct. So both of my sons are adults. They can make their decisions. My older son made his decision. He said, I'm fine. I'm going to get it. Although I was like nervous, but he got it and he's fine. Younger son, I think because he got COVID as well, he thought he didn't need it, but he may be pushed into it by his college. So DZ says, have there been any studies showing an increase of Guillain-Barré syndrome over a long period beyond the initial 4 weeks? I haven't seen those studies. D says, blink once for yes, twice for no. Melamorph says, what helps mitochondria? There are so many things that can help mitochondria. Anything that reduces reactive oxygen species. Melatonin is very, very important for mitochondria. Kini says, oh my God, goodness, I also experienced long haul diarrhea. Uh, Yes, it's a sad thing. Zen says, when you say COVID staying in some patients, would you clarify whether the spike protein remains an issue, staying in the body, not clearing? So, there are two categories of patients: those who were COVID infected or SARS CoV 2 infected, vaccine or not vaccine doesn't matter, SARS CoV 2 infected, or those who were vaccinated and had spike only. In both of them, the spike is a common one. So, spike is one pathogenetic factor. It does cause imbalance in the cell's function, AS2's function. It triggers inflammation. So it does a lot of things. I think it doesn't need to be repeated. Although the COVID itself, the SARS-CoV-2 itself, is pretty damaging as well. And so when we talk about staying in some patients, that is, if it is infection, it is SARS-CoV-2 being there and continuously bothering the immune system, and immune system continuously trying to clear the cells, and inflammation continuously occurring. And the result is you can see long haulers. Rima says, but lots of grain they were. Absolutely. Janabi says, do you have COVID? I had COVID last month. By 16th, I was fine. COVID and I have become friends. I continue to have COVID. Old school says, if primary NP says, I don't know what to test or do because I'm only a GP, but will refer you to whoever you think you need to see, what specialist should I ask to refer? So, hematologist to do the blood workup and to understand the clotting and platelets and platelet factors and everything, immune issues as well, and the cardiologist in the beginning, and gastroenterologist. Dermatologist if there is any skin issues, neurologist if there are any autonomic dysfunction or other neurology issues. But these three, gastroenterologist probably the first one, and then cardiovascular, and then hematologist, and then maybe neurologist and dermatologist. Atil says, have you seen that study that shows SP177 antibodies? So there are, I haven't seen this one. I'll look into this. Lori says, I also reddish skin bumps. So these reddish skin bumps can either be inflammation of the skin, or that can be because of the small vascular vasculitis and microscopic thrombosis. So is FLCCC right or wrong? They are very correct in almost every stance they have taken. There are some vaccine related stances where I may digress a little from them, but um, some of these, look, even the FLCCC protocol for long COVID, you might actually see my name in here somewhere, or they've probably, okay, so they've cleaned up the names. That's fine. So, what are the choices for the state to go to? M. Gregory says, can pericarditis be a result of GIT issues from COVID? Not GIT issues, but it can be because of the spike protein or the virus in the blood going to the heart or pericardium, and or antibodies going to pericardium and causing inflammation. Now, GIT issues could be a sign that the virus is harbored in the GIT, and from there, the immune dysregulations or antibody production could cause pericarditis. Jem says, have you seen severe cramping and muscle tremors? Yes. Yes, it's actually very common. Sandra says, can people be nice? I think it's just how it is. So, can we take stabilizers and antihistamines the same days? Depends. What is your intensity of the issue? But yes, if need be. Actually, patients of histamine related diseases or autoimmune diseases or mast cell type diseases, they have to figure out, experiment what combination works, what change in combination works, and they have to figure out their regimens. Skyfrog says, if it is remaining mostly in the gut, would it be useful to take Luffy on an empty stomach? Yes. Yes. M says, sorry to say, Dr. Bean, but you don't sound fine. So I have this little cough again from yesterday since she went, but that's Popularis says, any research studies about animal transmission, dogs, cats, etc. No, not hearing anything about this since cases were found more than years ago. I think that there is transmission to dogs and deers and others. We didn't discuss them, but there are studies about them. So Dave says, since the vaccine does not prevent you from getting infected from COVID, there is no reason to take it. So I had done this discussion for a long time that vaccine was never going to prevent us from getting the virus. Getting the virus in us is the infection. Getting the disease or symptoms is the disease. There is some good news with the vaccine, and that is it is good for severe outcomes. So if somebody feels that they are not at risk, then for them the pros and cons of vaccines are different. But somebody who is at risk of severe, then for them vaccine is a useful tool. But generally infection, I had always been saying that that's not going to happen. They were overcommitting, and now we all know they were overcommitting. You are very welcome, Jem. That is correct. That is correct, Dave. Skyfrog says, I vote for Tampa, best supports team. Okay, support teams. Lisbeth, that is very good. Rima says, are you hearing long COVID in third world countries? Yes. And do you know there is a bigger problem? So, first, third world countries, there are some countries in Africa where the infection itself is not very prevalent. But there are many countries, developing countries, where long COVID is, and the doctors actually neither agree with it nor do they help it. In many countries, it has become just like here in the US, vaccine injury is not very well um, recognized or not well acknowledged. There are countries where even long COVID is not acknowledged. Even here in the US as well. Sometimes long COVID is just called as a psychological issue. Letitia says, my private question is, do you regret getting the vaccine? No. So I feel now that I may have been at risk of getting injured severely in some cases, but for my age, it was fine to have the vaccine. And I am so grateful that my wife has recovered. Otherwise, that regret would have been there forever. So Letitia, you set me up. Now there will be a band of people who would come and call me names. Um, Somebody Zen said that calling it uh, psychological suggests politics, not coming from health. The problem is that sometimes doctors actually do not know what is going on. The labs usually come back clear. Doctors will have to be open minded, doing the research to understand what's going on, to be able to say this may be. Long COVID has now become mainstream, at least here in the US. It was not before. So there is a doctor's prep as well, more than the politics. Augie says if melatonin's half life is 40 minutes, why drowsy? It does that to me as well. So there are some slow release melatonins as well. So please make sure the slow release one is not the one you're taking. Joey is giving a thumbs up to Letitia. Letitia just set me up for. John says, if I recall correctly, it was transmission from cats to humans. I saw a message from Letitia. Letitia says, Dr. Drbeen, you are amazing. I would never set you up. I love you and wish you well. I know, thank you very much. But still, sometimes we can inadvertently set someone up. I have no complaints. I have seen your comments. I'm totally comfortable with your question, and I hope you're comfortable with my answer. That is my answer. Cynthia says, Skyfrog, Dr. B to Mrs. B. Oh, honey, do you want a coastal view? So, my wife does not want to move from California. John says, Dr. Bean, how can we tell that you are the real Dr. Bean? No idea. Who is Dr. Bean? Nick has a very good question. Do you think neurological damage from COVID can heal and make a full recovery? Of course, you know that the answer would be depends upon the extent of damage. However, there are severely impacted patients who have times of almost full recovery, and then they go back again in the long COVID or vaccine injury state, which tells me that even after months and months of long COVID, it is not necessary that the impact or the damage or pathology makes permanent damage. However, if we continue to have our body undergo this inflammation, then eventually the tissues would start getting damaged. But for a months or even year or so, there are patients who recover fully. This is why I suggest. So one of my friends is also vaccine damaged, vaccine injured, and he is also very stubborn. He does not want to take any medicine. So I had to request him that while we figure out what is wrong, continue to take at least anti-inflammatories, antihistamines, so that the damage to the body, the fire that is on, that should not cook the tissues. It should leave the tissues alone, even when the basic pathology is not removed. I think we're still trying to figure out what is the pathology. So it is wise to keep the inflammation under control so body is not damaged. Plus, reducing the inflammation gives a break to the immune system, and some cells that were supposed to die would die because they just needed that peace of mind to say, I'm not activated anymore, I'm not needed anymore, I can recycle. But if you keep a cell active, it would not recycle, it would turn off its apoptotic signals and it would not die. Nick, you're very welcome. Augie says, have the legal issues. So we have won on all fronts. Although I had bunch of financial losses, but yes, all these idiotic folks who were making complaints, they can whatever. Rima says, everybody please hit the like button if you like this. I've missed these chit chats. Okay, so here's the deal. I have to do 2 lectures every day because um, the discussions here are not supported that much anymore. And so I have to pay my bills. And so I have started doing the work for Dr. Bean a little more. So I would love to do the chit chats as well more frequently. The problem is I need to find time to continue to do 2 lectures daily, and it takes time. For example, last night I slept at 12 after doing a lecture for Dr. Bean, which had become delayed since the morning because I was reading this study, and then I had to draw a lot. But if I show you my drawings for Dr. Bean are so beautiful. Let me show you some drawings. I think you will be amazed. So today's lecture was genetic transfer via transformation. Okay. So some drawings just to show you how much. So do you see this? This is a, or let me show you the drawings first. Look at this drawing. This is a dead bacterium, and this is we call it in medicine, we call these as naked DNA. Naked DNA, that's why I kind of made them naked. And so this DNA has a little butt here and boobs here. So this is a naked DNA. What are naked DNAs? The pieces of DNA that fall out of a bacterium when the bacterium is broken down. These are called naked DNA. These naked DNAs can be picked up by another bacterium and used for capabilities. So look how, I think these are very cute drawings. Then look at this. If a bacterium is starving, just like we can have autophagy, correct? When our cells are starving, if you make a bacterium starve, it can start eating the environmental DNA fragments, the naked DNA, it starts picking them up. And why it starts picking them up? Does it try to eat them? It actually picks them up to see they may have a capability to help this bacterium find better nutrition and find better environment, or survive better in this environment. So imagine if the lights are out and you are kind of looking for food here and there, or the flashlight or whatever, this bacterium that is starving would then be looking for DNAs to eat, not eat, to take them, to see if they have any capabilities. So that's a very fascinating mechanism. So here, if this little naked DNA enters an incorrect bacterium with which it is not homologous, meaning it doesn't resemble it, then the DNases or nucleases in that bacterium just break it apart. They destroy it, just like our cells do. The RNA or DNA, if it arrives from outside, our cells destroy them. So here I drew that. And then if you take a bacterium, and imagine if it is not able to take naked DNA, you can make it take naked DNA by chilling it with calcium phosphate. So I made this little ice cube with calcium phosphate in it and chilled bacteria, which has now these pores open up from where the naked DNA can go in it. So these are the kind of work. So of course it takes time to produce these kind of lectures. And now I have done 12 in last 3 weeks. I'm pretty proud of these. All of them are high quality lectures. So, anyways, that is why I'm a little less focused on the chit chats. So, my question to you, did you like these diagrams? Atil says, how would you approach in tackling vaccine injury, long COVID, tachycardia, all blood work? And so, this is most probably two possible reasons to start with. Number one is the autonomic dysfunction, to see if it is related to hypovolemia and that. Now, hypovolemia, either autonomic dysfunction, which is an autoimmune issue, or this could be thyroid and the pituitary hormone issues reducing the blood volume. The other possibility is the cardiovascular autoantibodies against the cardiovascular system reducing the blood pressure. So these are three primary things to look at. Naughty says your diagrams are amazing. Thank you very much. August says focus on lectures only. Thank you. Rima says hysterical. Aren't these funny? Lime Limeade says dirty mind. No, so actually we call them naked DNA. So I wanted to make them naked. Giladoni says, Dr. Bean, can I share those pictures with my nursing school buddies? They're awesome. So this time, of course, this is a public video now in which these are, so sure. But generally, I just I'm creating those lectures. I usually post a few of these lectures online as well. So yes, Rand says your drawings are awesome. Thank you. Zen says incredible art. Thank you. MC says, nice. So MC, I like pastel colors. I like light colors for these. So the drawing itself is not yelling. Instead, you are just able to look at the concept, or you are able to hear the concept. So for example, here is a concept. The concept is when a bacteria breaks down, the DNA comes out of it, pieces of DNA, bacterial DNA. These are called naked DNA. And if there is another bacterium nearby that is starving, it's going to pick them up. So I don't want these diagrams to be so um, yelling and screaming to say, look at me, that we forget the actual concept. But I still want them to be shocking enough that it becomes tattooed in your head. You remember it. So this naked DNA, I don't think you'll forget. And especially those folks who would think that this is actually a face, and they'll find out that no, these are boobs and these are eyes, so this is not a face. And all of a sudden, and here is a little tiny butt, so they say, oh man, this is actually a naked DNA. So they will not forget this. And that is a point. I try that these become not forgettable. The only thing I do not know, this is correct, clickbait titles. I have no idea how to do clickbait. So I am totally bad at that. That is correct. $67. The link in the description here on the YouTube is $67. That is, look, just one such diagram. If you go to a professional artist, they would take what, $100, $200, and 900 such videos with many, many such diagrams for $67. Margaret says, Dr. Bean, yes, congratulations. Thank you very much. Admiration says, I want t shirts of this starving bacterium. I usually do make the t-shirts, but then nobody buys them. So I can I can put them up. So what, why, and who? So it's not only the laypersons, actually medical students, nurses, doctors also have a recall, better recall with these diagrams. We actually have a bigger problem. We have to learn and remember and recall this vast amount of medicine. So every trick in the book, every hint that can make the memory or a concept tattooable in our head, and then we can recall it better, is awesome. Jem says, you're exceptionally talented doctor and educator, and your diagrams are always beautiful and so engaging. Thank you very much. August says, maybe cell physiology for smarty pants with your drawings. Yes. So I think we can, best drawings ever. Thank you, Rima. I think we can start writing books. Actually, I was going to ask you this. I have an opportunity to write immunology book. However, if I start writing them in addition to doing these things, then it won't be possible. So I was thinking that my evening talk, 6 o'clock, I change some of those talks, maybe a couple of them every day, to do immunology topics once more. I've done immunology about 10 years ago, but doing it once more. Would you be okay that other than COVID, we do some immunology as well? That would actually help me write the book. The problem is, anytime I deviate from COVID, audience just does not even watch it. They 2,000 views and they're done. Lucy says, impossible to forget naked DNA. Yes. Can you imagine this? I was actually cracking up when I was making it, uh, because it is double helix, so it is coiled two strands, but then these strands they have their boobs and butts as well, so they're naked. I was actually laughing when I was doing it. Cool. Limeade says, I do not like the hater channels trying to discredit you always. So there is a rule, and thank you very much for this, but there is a rule. There is always going to be people who are upset and angry, and I find it actually below a person's position to criticize others just for the sake of criticizing. So I know that there are folks like that. I also know that they picked a fight, they got beaten up with me, by me, then they became angry and they started doing these things. I call them bottom feeders. The best thing, even for them, is to add their message and provide their part of education. But it is very difficult to actually offer education. I mean, think about it, sitting the whole day long, reading papers, then making sense of them, then drawing them, then presenting them. That is difficult than to say, Dr. Bean is wrong. That is easier. So I always find that interesting. But at the same time, prophets came and went, and God and presidents and whoever, there are people who are upset with all these structures. So who am I? It's very clever. The naked DNA double strand looks like an embarrassed woman trying to hide. Oh yeah, so that could too. You're very welcome, Jem. So I was very young and I went to a teacher. So teachers made me a teacher. I went to a teacher and I was trying to figure out what should I do. And he said this. this message. He read a couple of verses from a poem, but that what that meant was, instead of complaining about the darkness, it is best even if you can just light a single candle to add light against the darkness. Do your part. So he taught me, he said, look, it is not useful to complain about the darkness, add your part. And I think in the US type or Western dialogue, adding your part is more interesting. For example, I could have made so many videos and talks about Malones and Geertz, and there are so many folks who just make weird uh, concepts. I'm sorry if someone likes them, but there are so many flaws. But it's just that's not my business. I'm not their science police. I'm not concept police. I'm not for to correct others. I am going to add my part. And I've always maintained that I could make mistakes. I have actually made mistakes where I took my videos down twice now. And I was wrong. When I was doing it, I thought I was correct. And then I had to take them down. One video was about the pregnancy and the COVID vaccine. The other video was this guy who runs a channel to try to discredit me. His friend from MIT did uh, a study which was fraudulent. So I became very angry on that. First, I did the discussion of the study, then I found out it is fraudulent, then I hammered him. Then that caused this guy to become upset, and he asked me, don't hammer him. And I said, well, he can come online and have this discussion, otherwise he's full of crap and they did wrong. And that enabled this guy to, that triggered him, and he became this channel to go after me. But that's, so I have made mistakes. I have acknowledged them, taken them down, and I may still have mistakes that I'm not aware of. I've never claimed that I have always said everything correctly, but I have done as much diligence as possible and then some. Kini says, Dr. Bean, this quote from your teacher filled my soul. I'm past my bedtime, but I learned so much from you about how to be a better human. Thank you very much. And I learned from you all. Hillary says, you're not strange. I also think Dr. Bean has a soothing voice. Hearing this his science talks calms, regulates my emotions, the sane voice of reason and such in an often in world. That is correct. Thank you very much. Sky says, if people come after you, Dr. Bean, just tell them it wasn't you, but the people who pretend to be you. Okay, I will do that. Letitia, thank you very much. So I think I've done good job of keeping the electricity preserved, conserved, something. So I hope this is okay to ask. Can you practice in the US if you wish to? No. So even if I was licensed, I'm not licensed here. Even if I was licensed and if I did not practice, either I have to continue to do CMEs or I have to somehow stay in the game. If not, then I would be out. So I'm not even licensed here. So, but you can weave COVID into it. So that's what I was thinking, that maybe 2-3 days we talk about COVID, and then a couple of days we talk about immunology, and those topics that I do, they become part of the book. John says, do you really not have AC? I have AC. So AC is working kind of iffy. We have a centralized AC. It is working, but I've kept the lights off. You really have no idea what a treasure you are. So too many of the gift. Man, thank you very much. We are all together. Yes, yes, I'm. I am. I am licensed somewhere else. Tamila says, "I love that lecture with immunology." Okay, so I'll try it. Move to Pennsylvania. Enough CA. Okay. Adi Bean says, I'm wearing my Dr. Bean t shirt right now. Looking forward to the long sleeve COVID slayer soon as the weather starts to get cooler here. Very good. So M says, how do you know which research you look at is valid, not compromised? It's a very difficult thing. For example, as I said, I did two discussions which were just totally flawed. And um, I learned a lot during this 2.5 years to kind of look at the sources and the funders. The only advantage I have is when I see the mechanism, I can make sense of it that this is a BS mechanism or not. I can actually tell you studies from some of the names I spoke where there are BS mechanisms. So that knowledge of medicine and the mechanism and my love with the mechanisms has actually allowed me to do a little bit more vetting, but I still sometimes fall for the fraudulent studies. Yes. So, Robin, under my videos, there is a little Dr. Bean shop. Sita says, I'll buy the t shirts. Thank you. Trillium, that is very correct. If every nurse, NP, PA, medical student, doctor became an expert in immunology, and becoming an expert in immunology, not immunologist, is not a difficult thing. There are a basic that innate arm and the acquired arm and the proteins. There are basic fundamental structures that can help. When I started teaching this, there were so many doctors who called me and said, I read it when I was in medical college and then I forgot about it. But if they are masters of this, they can really do a lot of good for their patients. So, yes, I agree with you. It is underrated. Dear Donny says, Dr. Bean, you got me hooked on mechanisms. Totally the key to nursing school. Bless you. Absolutely. So, Critical Thought says, if you used a VPN to Skype with you, could you treat us in your practicing country? That's a very smart idea. That was very smart. Thank you, Dr. Bean, for all the hard work you do. Thank you very much, Margaret. And thank you, Margaret, for your continuous support as well, continued support as well. So, with this, um, let's break for today. Now, tomorrow I have a interview with Dr. Sayed Haider. I think he's preparing for a conference, and so he's having lectures. So my time with them is, I think, at 4 my time, and so I may not be able to prepare for this lecture. So if not, maybe we'll just do a chit chat or we'll skip. We'll see. But just be aware that tomorrow after 4 I have a um, interview, a lecture recording with Dr. Sayed Haider's team. Is that a question for me? It becomes cooler at night. Saraswati says, good night, Dr. Bean, your love. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. And please like, subscribe, and share. Skyfrog, thank you very much. So, like, subscribe, and share. There are links in the description if you would like to support this work. And I would maybe I'll see you tomorrow. I'll let you know depending upon how my day goes. If I'm able to prepare for the evening before Dr. Heather's lecture, then I'll come online. Otherwise, maybe we'll skip it or we'll do a chit chat. Thank you very much. See you possibly tomorrow.